Welcome, viewers, to the college essay workshop presentation. We are so excited that you are joining us. This is such an important topic when we're talking about the college search and the application process, because the college essay, really we should say the college essays, plural, are such a key component to the admissions review process. And it's also the area where students end up spending the most amount of their concentrated energy when going through the application process. And so many questions come up as to what should I write about? What are the colleges looking for in the college, essay portion of the application process? And we really hope that you walk away from today feeling more confident in how to approach these different types of essays, the different ways that you can approach the essays, and how to be a bit strategic. And not that college applications are strategic, but they can be strategic for you in terms of looking at your college admissions application as a whole, and what this essay means for you as an individual in the review process. So I like to talk about kind of the high level of things and then go in depth into the essays, just so you have a good grasp of where the essays fall in the college admissions evaluation process and what it really means. And so there's really 5 key areas that colleges are looking at when they're reviewing a student's application. And so these are those 5 areas. So everything from your class rigor. So, what classes a student chose to take in high school, whether they chose to challenge themselves with honors, APs, IBs, dual enrollment programs, for example, their GPA, whether it's an unweighted or weighted GPA, the essays, of course, as we're going to talk about today, extracurricular activities. And then for some colleges that do require test scores or are willing to take it into consideration, the SAT or ACT scores. These are going to be the 5 key areas that the majority of colleges will be focusing on in the college admissions review process, okay? So we're going to be focusing on essays today. Now, why are the essays so important, right? So I kind of like to use this kind of balance beam visual here, because there's multiple parts that are being reviewed in the application process. And most of these things are completely out of a student's control. At the point that they're applying to schools, they have already chosen what their academic performance was in high school. They can't go back to freshman or sophomore year, for example, to change their grades, or maybe the effort they put into a class. They cannot change whether they decided to take that honors or AP class, for example. They also can't go back in time and look at their extracurricular activities. At this point in time, whether they chose to be extremely involved in multiple things, whether they tried to be involved in more than, just kind of one concentrated area, but they took on leadership positions, those things cannot be changed at this point in time. And even SAT or ACT scores, while a student can do additional test prep, they can take the test 10 times if they wanted. I sure hope not, but if they wanted, naturally students are going to test within a certain range, whether that's based off of academic ability. Maybe they're not a strong test taker, and so they're never going to be able to get those scores above a certain threshold, at least at this point in their life. Again, those are the things that are out of their control. But the essay is something that is very much in your control. And so I think for students, it's important for them to understand that the essay can actually tip the scale in your favor if approached correctly. Right? Because this is your way for the admissions team to learn more about you, not only in your efforts and your writing abilities, but really giving them a glimpse as to who you are as a person that is not already noted in these other items on the scale. And so that's why it's so important to have this conversation and to not just kind of poo-poo the essay portion of an application, and understanding why it really does play an important role as to whether a student may or may not receive admission to a college or university. So there's 2 different ways that colleges read applications. There are going to be what we call data-driven schools in terms of their application review process, and they are truly focused on just the quantitative pieces of the application, whether it's the rigor, looking at, counting how many honors, how many AP, IB courses, for example, did a student take, your overall your GPA, your core GPA, so that GPA that's focused, primarily on those core academic classes. So your humanities and social sciences, world languages, math, sciences, for example. And then SAT or ACT scores. Those are data-driven colleges, and all they are looking at is that data-driven side. So for them, they probably don't even have an essay component, or that's not really a part of the review process. They're pretty much by formula deciding whether a student should receive admission or not. Now, the majority of colleges and universities, especially today, are what we like to call holistic admission review universities. And so they're taking that data-driven portion, as we just talked about, but also looking into additional qualitative pieces as part of the college application review process. And so that's when they're taking into account those maybe teacher or counselor recommendations, that resume of activities, awards that you may have received. And of course, in this circumstance, the essays, whether that's one concrete essay or whether it's multiple shorter essays. They are taking that into the holistic review process to really paint a bigger, more comprehensive picture of a student and whether they are a good fit for their university and ultimately whether they should offer admission to that student or not. Okay. So what do we know about these essays, right? So they're typically the highest ranked non-academic feature of an application. So when you're looking at your GPA and your test scores, right, next up is going to come your essays. It's going to come before teacher recommendations, for example. It's going to come before your resume of activities. Your essay is going to be right there towards the top. So it really does carry quite a bit of weight. When you're talking to these different colleges and their admission counselors, if they're talking to you about their review process, what kind of goes on behind the scenes for them? What do they really care about in the review process? So basically, if a college expresses to you that the data points matter, your GPA matters, for example, but they know that that does not define a student, well, that's your cue to let you know that that essay means even more to them. Okay. So again, the college that expresses even more so of a holistic review, you need to know that the essay probably pulls even more weight for them than maybe some of the other holistic admission review colleges and universities. And then just kind of as a reminder, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, these essays and some students like to view them as their personal statements. This is truly the thing that you have control over. You control how much effort, how much editing goes in. You are the one that controls what topic you talk about, how you approach that topic. So feel empowered through the essay. Don't view it as a stress point. View it as this is the one thing I have control over. So I'm going to do a really great job with it because this is my way of being able to show them either how much I want to get into the school, what that school means for me, or explaining something that's important in your past that is a good reflection of who you are as a person and what you might contribute to their college or university. So again, essays are empowering. Focus on that, okay? So what is the purpose, though, of the essay? So we know how important it is, but what is the actual purpose? The essay really is that way to kind of close the gap for colleges of the data-driven part with the qualitative part. They're trying to figure out who you are. Many colleges, no longer do interviews, with their admissions team, or, some of them do alumni interviews, but for the admission counselors themselves, the essay is the closest that it comes, excuse me, for having a conversation with you. So this is your way of, again, painting a fuller picture of who you are as a person. What is it that has been left out of your application? What has been left unsaid? And use the essay to help fill that gap, right? But it's also a way for them to see kind of your academic abilities in terms of your writing structure, your way that you're able to communicate, and the process that you took. Because the fact is, most of these college essays are not written in one 10-minute setting. Oftentimes there's the brainstorming session, then there's one draft, two drafts. Maybe you have somebody else go and read the college essay to make sure that there aren't any typos, or that the point you wanted to get across was conveyed. And we're going to talk about this more in depth in just a second. But again, that's the purpose of this essay. It really does tell them a lot. And we're going to dig into that deeper in just a minute. So when you read these essay prompts, oftentimes the question that comes up, and I know this is asked of us all the time at Scholar Trek, is, well, what is it that colleges really want to know, right? And there's lots of things that a college may want to know depending on the specific prompt that they're giving. But for the most part, it really drills down to one of two things. One, the college wants to know, like, why should we pick you? right? Why do we want you on our campus? Okay, that's the first driver. And then the second is, if we do pick you, are you going to be a good fit? What are you going to contribute to our community? So just as much as you're trying to find schools that are the right fit for you, these colleges are trying to find students that are the right fit for them. And if you have that in mind, it's really going to help you drive what, again, you want to convey in these college essays. So there's two different types of essays that students are going to come across. And for this, we kind of call it the main essay. Students, you may view this as the Common App essay that's often referred to. This is going to be your larger essay. They're often about 650 words or a little bit less. This is going to be that longer, more comprehensive essay. Then there's going to be potentially, because not all schools require these, supplemental essays. And these are going to be more specific to that college or university. They're often shorter, so they're often 250 words or less, sometimes as few as 50 words. Believe it or not, those we don't really call essays. Those are just kind of like prompt replies, shall we say. But these really do work together. So for the schools that are asking you to submit that main essay or that Common App essay along with a couple supplemental essays, you kind of have to view this as a production, right? You don't want to necessarily be talking about the same thing because you're actually being given a gift. You're being given the opportunity to display more facets of who you are and what you have to contribute to that college. And so you want to make sure that they work together, that they are not redundant, and that they really do help paint that picture. It's kind of like a theater production in a way, okay? So when we're looking at that main essay, this is most often the most relatable to a personal statement. And students get tripped up with this. Sometimes when they see the word personal statement, they don't know, what do you mean? Like, I'm just supposed to talk about me? Like, what is that? What am I supposed to talk about? Because for students, this is the first time they've applied to anything. Some students have, of course, held down a part-time job while in high school, while others have not had that opportunity. And so this is their first time really trying to convey to an outside organization, in this sense, an outside college, university, why they're interested in that school and who they are. So we want to dig into that. So where do you begin with your main essay or this personal statement, right? This is helpful for you to just take down these notes. If you're watching this, come back to this presentation, screenshot this, whatever helps you. You can find time to talk with one of the Scholar Trek team members one-on-one. I'm always happy to help you. But really, the question is, who are you? And I realize that's not some basic question to ask. But you want to start talking about, like, what are the items that define you, right? And so that's why we kind of put a number here. We kind of say, what are 10 items that define you, whether that's involvement in an activity, whether that's values that hold close to your heart, whether there's certain objects that are important to you, whatever that may be. Write those things down. Because ultimately what you're going to take from this self-reflection is, well, are there any stories? And they may not seem like the most glamorous stories, and that's okay. But what's a story that's meaningful that would help convey at least some of these essence objects, as we like to call them, to the college university, right? What is it about you that they need to know? And what is a story from your life that might be helpful to share with them? It's important to consider fit in this. And what we mean by fit is, when you're looking at these different colleges and universities, maybe there's something about you that you go, that school is the right fit for me because, well, maybe your story that you want to tell helps them understand why you view their school as a good fit. So that can also be helped, in prompting what story you might want to share in that main essay or personal statement, right? That's a key part when looking at this. And for some students, this can be a bit emotional. And so I'll prepare that, students, it's always nice to stay surface level. And by no means are you committing to, divulging your deepest and darkest secrets. But do know these are professionals and very caring individuals who will be reviewing your essay. And so if you do feel like discussing, a hard topic, that is okay to do. I do ask that if you are ever talking about a subject that you feel like could be a trigger for someone else reading your essay, just be polite, maybe add a trigger warning before your essay starts. So just in case there is an admissions counselor who has, walked a similar path to you, and it could be something that one, they may really relate to, and that's a beautiful thing, but it may be something that maybe they're not the best fit to read that essay. They could have another team member read your application. You want to be respectful and considerate of that. But oftentimes students really do go dig deep with these stories. And oftentimes they are stories that, when I used to work on the college side, I've read thousands of essays, and I truly believe there were things that were shared with me and self-reflections that were shared that I think maybe their closest friends and family didn't even know about them. And so while you don't have to do that, I do just want you to know that the individuals reading these essays care deeply and keep this information as confidential as possible. So kind of some quick tips when you're trying to, again, develop what story you're going to share or what topic you're going to kind of dig deep into. Is it's important to know that the essay is not about the stuff that you have done, right? So you don't want to be talking about your resume basically all over again. You may be talking about a specific item on your resume, but it's digging deeper into it and telling the story or about the lessons that you learned and how it impacted you as a person. You're not here to be listing off all the things that you have done as an athlete, as a volunteer, right? We want this to be deeper than that. It's really about who you are and what you care about. And ultimately, you want to sit back and go, does this essay help paint a better picture of who I am? If it helps somebody get to know me, if that's how you come across, you're doing a great job in the initial stages of writing or drafting this essay. The other things are, kind of reflecting on your key personality traits. We like to call them signature characteristics. Again, thinking about to those 10 essence points, right? What are some things that you would want to make sure that they knew about you? Your tenacity, right? They want to know about that. Are there things that that, oh my gosh, I am competitive to no end. Okay, well, let's talk about that, but let's talk about how being competitive is a positive asset to you. And again, helping that develop into a story that ultimately helps the college know, hey, we won that, competitive individual on our campus. Like, that's going to be fun. That's going to boost people up. That's going to help our community thrive. That's really what you're trying to look at in these self-reflections. So there's two ways to sell your story and to not tell. And I'm sure if you've had certain English teachers amongst your years in high schools, you have heard this statement more times than you'd like to say, sell, not tell a story. But there's two helpful ways when it comes to kind of the main college essay that you can approach this to make sure that you are selling yourself and not telling. And that's through either a narrative approach or a montage approach. Okay. Most students do tend to go the narrative approach. And so that's where you're doing things where it truly is a story where you're talking about this happened and then this happened and then this happened, and this is how I grew, right? It's a full narrative, and that's great. And for many students, that's very successful and a great way for them to approach it. Other students approach these essays in what we like to call a montage approach. And the montage approach can be phenomenal, but it can be very easy to mess up. So if you do go through a montage approach to these essays, this is where it's really key to make sure you have other individuals read your essay, not even so much for grammar and punctuation, but to make sure that you ask them, hey, I want you to read my essay. After you read it, I'm not going to tell you what I wrote about. After you read it, tell me what you gathered from this essay. And if that person tells you something that is different than you were hoping to convey, you're going to need to go either back to the drawing board or do some major editing. Okay. And that's really helpful. So in the montage approach, this is where, you're taking multiple maybe stories and trying to relate them to, one key characteristic. So maybe you're trying to paint how it is that you became such a resilient person. And so you were using multiple components to be able to convey that. But ultimately, you're hoping the underlining message is, hey, I am a resilient person, and the admissions counselor goes, yeah, that's a resilient person. That's what we got from this essay, right? And so it's important to kind of think of it as like a collage or the multiple scenes within a movie that are all leading up to that big moment. But it really is important that they all end up drawing back to a central theme. If that central theme is lost, it can be very confusing. And unfortunately, you have lost that great opportunity in your essay to tip the scales and to share that information you were hoping to convey to the admissions committee. Now, shifting gears a little bit, and of course, some of this advice you're going to also take into your main, larger admissions essay, but we're going to talk about supplemental essays for a second. Now, most supplemental essays really get down to the why us questions. So, the colleges are wanting to go, why our school out of the thousands of colleges and university, why us? And they often like to ask, why do you want to attend this institution? And they're looking for specific reasons, right? And so we categorize these kind of into 3 different areas to help you make sure that you're properly answering the why us and why do you want to attend questions. So number 1 is to be specific. Do your research, right? Everybody has the pamphlet. Everybody's been to the main page, hopefully, of the college's admission site. But we really want to make sure that you're doing your research to really hone in on why that school. Whether it has something to do with your academic interests, your social interests. Is there a cool story about a student who did research that really resonated with you? A professor who has an area of interest that aligns with yours? Share that information. If you are fortunate enough to be able to do an on-campus tour and there was something that you took away from your tour, write those notes down, because this is going to be a great way where you can wrap back around to that moment on that tour where there was something that very specific resonated with you that you may want to mention in the supplemental essay. Then there's convey, right? All schools, just like companies and organizations, they have their philosophies and their missions, right? You want to make sure, one, that you know what the mission is for that school and their philosophy, because that's a good way for you to figure out whether that school is a good fit for you or not. But that can be a great driver, both for your supplemental essays and your main essay, to helping kind of connect those dots as to why you're a good fit within their philosophy or mission as a university. So you want to be able to convey that passion for those different areas. Oftentimes these mission statements and philosophies are shared in, their publications, through their on-campus or virtual admission, information sessions. You really want to be able to figure out what are the core values of that school, how do they resonate to you, and making sure that you share examples of those core values in your own life in those supplemental essays. That's a great way to approach it. The last is just really, making quick journal entries, like I mentioned earlier, when you visit a campus or you're meeting with a representative. So even as you're watching these college panels, visiting these virtual booths, having ongoing conversations with these college admission counselors, you need to be making notes of those conversations, because again, it's only going to help you feel more confident when you're doing these essays, that it is painting the picture of who you are and helping get across to each college and university why you are a good fit for their institution. Okay. From that, I want to make sure that in the chat box here, that if you do have any questions, if you are viewing this presentation live, that we can answer them for you. If you do have questions about these essays in general, please reach out to our team at ScholarTrek at any point in time. You can send us an email, call us. We want to be able to help you through the college search and application process, and the essay part is just such a key component of this and figuring out whether you're in the right direction. But my parting words for you, really is this, when you're writing your essay and somebody else, again, is reading your essay, it's important that you have, multiple people review your essay to make sure that the point you're trying to convey is there. Right. And if an essay prompt seems confusing to you, because oftentimes some of these essay prompts are not as straightforward as we would like them to be, at the end of the day, the question is about you. So even if it's phrased slightly differently, maybe it makes you think you should be sharing a story about somebody who inspired you. Yes, you do want to share information about why that person inspired you. But at the end of the day, the colleges are trying to learn about who you are as a person, And so you want to make sure that your response is primarily focused about you, your growth, you as an individual. And if you have done that, you are in a winning position with these essays. So we know that there's a lot that goes into them, a lot of effort. Unfortunately, sometimes a lot of stress, but we hope that this information was helpful for you. And if at any point in time, like I said, the Scholar Track team can be of help, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at any time.